Let me tell you something about liars. They don't just tell lies. They engineer them. They don't throw words in the air and hope you believe. They calculate. They design questions that control how you think, what you feel, and how you respond. And if you don't recognize these questions, you'll fall right into their trap. So today, I want to break down 5 questions liars use to manipulate you and how to shut them down before they get the best of you. Don't you trust me? This is the liar's favorite. They flip the spotlight back onto you. Suddenly, it's not about their suspicious behavior. It's about your loyalty. They make you feel guilty for even questioning them. Here's the truth. Trust is not given, it's earned. When someone demands it instead of proving it, that's your first red flag. Why would I lie to you? Simple. Because they have something to hide. This question isn't about proving innocence. It's about shutting you up. Liars use it to disarm you, to make you feel silly for even suspecting them. But think about it if someone was truly honest. They'd show you facts, not guilt trip you with rhetorical questions. Who are you going to believe? Me or them? This is manipulation at its finest. They corner you into choosing sides, making the situation about loyalty instead of truth. The tactic is division. They want to isolate you from the truth by forcing you to pick them. Don't fall for it. The real question should never be who you believe. It should always be what is true. If you loved me, you'd believe me. This is emotional blackmail. A liar attaches your love, care, or friendship as collateral for their story. They're betting on your emotions overpowering your logic. But remember, this love does not require blindness. Love requires respect, and respect means honesty. Can't we just move on? Liars hate accountability. They don't want the conversation. They don't want the truth. They just want to bury it. They'll rush you into moving on, so they can escape responsibility. But moving on without truth is not peace, it's avoidance. And avoidance always comes back stronger. Liars don't control with lies alone. They control with questions. Questions designed to corner you, confuse you, and silence you. When you hear these 5, don't get defensive. Don't explain yourself. Instead, pause, watch, recognize the strategy. Because the moment you see the game is over. And let me leave you with this. Honesty doesn't fear questions. Only liars do. Liars manipulate by shifting blame and making you doubt yourself. This tactic is one of the most powerful tools in the arsenal of a manipulator because it turns the tables on you without you even realizing it. Instead of you questioning them, they make you question yourself. They don't always do it with direct lies. Instead, they shape conversations, throw guilt into the mix, and twist the narrative so that the spotlight never stays on them. It moves to you, your decisions, your feelings, your suspicions. The liar carefully crafts their words so you begin to think, maybe I'm overreacting. Maybe I'm being too harsh. Maybe I really am the problem. That's how manipulation works. It creates self-doubt. And once doubt takes root, you stop pressing them for answers. The psychological power of blame, shifting lies in how human beings are wired. Most of us want to see ourselves as fair, good, and reasonable. When someone suggests we're being unfair or mistrusting, we immediately question our own behavior. Liars exploit this natural self-reflection. For example, imagine confronting someone about an inconsistency in their story. Instead of answering, they might say, "Why don't you ever trust me?" In that instant, the original issue is buried. You are no longer focused on their suspicious behavior. You're now busy defending yourself against the accusation of being untrusting. The liar has succeeded in redirecting the conversation away from their actions. This pattern often shows up in relationships whether personal or professional. A friend who doesn't want to admit they lied about plans will shift blame by making you feel guilty for asking. A coworker caught in dishonesty may accuse you of micromanaging or being paranoid. A partner who has been deceptive might twist things so you look like the one who's insecure. Each time, the strategy is the same. Move the focus away from them, place it onto you, and make you feel wrong for even questioning. That subtle psychological move is what keeps liars from being exposed. One of the reasons this works so effectively is because liars are skilled at appealing to your emotions rather than facts. They know facts can be checked, but emotions are messy, personal, and harder to argue against. When they say, "Don't you trust me?" it's not about logic. It's about pulling at your emotional need to maintain harmony and avoid conflict. They rely on your desire to smooth things over rather than escalate tension. This makes you vulnerable to manipulation because now the issue is no longer about whether they told the truth, but whether you're a good, trusting, supportive person. Once you start defending yourself, you've already lost ground. Instead of holding them accountable, you're on trial. You find yourself justifying your suspicions. "I do trust you, but this seemed strange." Or, "I'm not saying you're lying. I just noticed something." These statements sound reasonable, but they put you back into a defensive role while the liar gains control. This shift can become a repeated cycle where every time you question them, they flip the blame back onto you until you eventually give up. That is exactly the outcome they want. Another layer of blame shifting lies in the way liars exaggerate your behavior. They may accuse you of being too suspicious, too controlling, or too sensitive. By labeling your actions with negative traits, they further create self-doubt. Instead of recognizing your instinct for truth, you begin to believe you're overanalyzing. Over time, this erodes your confidence and makes you more dependent on their version of reality. The longer this continues, the more power the liar holds because you stop trusting your own judgment. It's also important to see how layers mix truth with manipulation. They don't always fabricate everything. Sometimes they admit a small mistake to appear honest, then quickly shift the blame back to you. For example, they may say, "Yes, I forgot to tell you about that, but honestly, the way you always jump to conclusions is exhausting." Notice what happens here. They admit something small, then immediately redirect the conversation to your supposed flaw. You're left defending yourself instead of addressing the actual lie. This blend of partial honesty with blame shifting makes their deception even harder to detect. The psychological toll of this manipulation is heavy. People who experience repeated blame shifting often feel drained, confused, and uncertain of themselves. They begin to hesitate before questioning anything because they fear being labeled as distrustful or paranoid. Over time, this creates a toxic dynamic where the liar maintains control and the victim feels powerless. Self-doubt grows while accountability disappears. The manipulator thrives in this environment because it ensures their lies go unchallenged. When liars shift blame, their ultimate goal is control. By making you doubt yourself, they protect their story and keep you from digging deeper. It's not about winning an argument. It's about silencing you before the truth comes out. This is why many people realize only later, sometimes years later, that they were manipulated. At the time, they were too caught up defending themselves to see what was happening. The key realization is that liars exploit your instincts for fairness, trust, and compassion. They twist those strengths into weaknesses. They count on you to second guess yourself, to avoid conflict, to want peace more than truth. And every time you fall into that trap, they gain more ground. Emotional blackmail is their strongest weapon to control your response. When a liar feels their words alone are not enough to hold you, they bring emotion into the equation. They understand that logic can be challenged, evidence can be verified, and facts can be tested, but emotions are harder to control. Emotions don't follow rules or reason. They rise suddenly, overwhelm you, and cloud judgment. A skilled manipulator knows this, and that's why emotional blackmail becomes their sharpest tool. It allows them to bypass your logic and tie your reactions directly to how much you care, how much you love, and how much guilt you can carry. The tactic begins with attaching your emotions to their version of events. They create a situation where questioning them feels like betrayal, where doubting them feels like cruelty, and where pushing for truth feels like punishment. For example, when they say, "If you loved me, you'd believe me," they are not offering proof of honesty. They are shifting the weight of responsibility onto you. The burden is no longer on them to prove their truthfulness. It is now on you to prove your loyalty. This switch is powerful because it doesn't just touch your mind, it strikes your heart. And when your heart is involved, you are far less likely to press harder for the truth. People who use emotional blackmail don't always scream or cry. Sometimes they act wounded. They show disappointment, they sigh, they withdraw. They create an atmosphere that makes you feel guilty for even asking questions. This quiet form of blackmail can be more effective than open confrontation because it relies on your own conscience to do the heavy lifting. You look at their face, their silence, their sadness, and suddenly you wonder if you've gone too far. The liar hasn't had to defend themselves. They've made you defend your compassion. Another common form of emotional blackmail is fear. A manipulator might imply or even state directly that if you keep questioning them, the relationship will suffer, or they will walk away, or something worse will happen. The fear of loss is one of the most powerful motivators in human behavior, and liars weaponize it. They might say, "I can't believe you'd accuse me of that. Maybe we shouldn't even be together if you think so little of me." Notice the shift. The topic is no longer their actions, but whether you are about to lose them. Suddenly, your fear of abandonment outweighs your need for answers. They have won not by proving their honesty, but by making you afraid of what you might lose if you keep pushing. Guilt is another thread woven into this manipulation. Liars know that good people don't want to hurt others. They'll frame your suspicion as an attack, making you feel like you've caused them pain. They may even exaggerate this pain to intensify your guilt. "I can't believe you think I would do that after everything I've done for you." Now the situation is framed as you being ungrateful, untrusting, and unfair. You feel guilty for doubting them, even though your instincts may be right. This guilt forces you to back off, apologize, or reassure them. And in doing so, you give them exactly what they want: freedom from accountability. One of the more sophisticated layers of emotional blackmail is mixing love with obligation. When liars say things like, "If you really cared about me, you'd let this go," they are essentially using your affection as a leash. They know love motivates people to sacrifice, to compromise, to forgive. They twist that natural willingness into a weapon to silence you. Your love becomes proof not of their truth, but of your willingness to accept what they say without further question. This keeps the power firmly in their hands while making you feel like you're the one preserving harmony. Emotional blackmail also works because it plays on identity. When you're accused of being mistrustful, disloyal, or cold, you don't just doubt your actions, you doubt yourself as a person. Nobody wants to see themselves as unloving or heartless. Liars exploit that. They push you into a corner where standing up for yourself feels like a betrayal of the person you want to be. So instead of insisting on truth, you give in because you don't want to feel like you've failed as a partner, friend, or family member. This deep psychological manipulation turns your very sense of self against you. The devastating part of emotional blackmail is how invisible it can be in the moment. You think you're compromising for love, preserving peace, or being the bigger person. You don't always realize you're being manipulated. That realization often comes much later when you look back and see the pattern. You remember all the times you dropped your questions, silenced your doubts, and surrendered your instincts because the cost of pushing felt too high. What you thought was love or compassion was actually control being exercised over you through guilt, fear, and obligation. A skilled manipulator knows they don't need to win every argument. They just need to train you to stop fighting. Each time they use emotional blackmail and you back down, the pattern strengthens. The next time they don't have to push as hard because you've already learned that pressing too far leads to guilt, fear, or loss. This conditioning builds over time until you stop asking questions entirely. The liar has effectively rewired your emotional responses so that protecting them feels safer than confronting them. When emotional blackmail becomes the foundation of interactions, it creates a dynamic where truth is always buried under feelings. Logic has no space, evidence is dismissed, and your instincts are silenced. The liar thrives in this environment because they know your emotions will always shield them from exposure. They understand that if they can tie your love, your guilt, or your fear to their words, they never have to prove anything. Their manipulation becomes self-sustaining because you do the work of silencing yourself while believing you're doing it out of care. Recognizing manipulation questions ends their power instantly. The reason questions from liars are so effective is because they are designed to catch you off guard. They sound simple, almost harmless, but they carry hidden traps that shift the conversation, create guilt, and distort your thinking. When you don't see the manipulation, you naturally respond in the way they want you to. You defend yourself, you explain, you justify. Every word you say strengthens their control. But the moment you recognize what they are doing, everything changes. Awareness cuts the strings they try to pull because you are no longer reacting unconsciously. You are observing the tactic. A liar's strategy depends on your unawareness. They want you to hear their questions and accept them as normal parts of a conversation. When they say, "Don't you trust me?" the power of that question is in how you instinctively feel the need to answer. You may rush to reassure them, defend your loyalty, or soften your suspicions. That automatic reaction is what keeps them safe. If instead you recognize the question for what it really is, a manipulation attempt, you no longer need to answer it. You pause. You think. You see the hidden game behind the words. That pause alone is enough to break the rhythm they are trying to control. Recognition also stops you from falling into circular arguments. Liars love to trap people in endless back and forth debates where the original issue disappears. Their questions are designed to drag you into defending yourself instead of holding them accountable. For example, when they ask, "Why would I lie to you?" the question is not truly meant to be answered. It is meant to make you feel foolish for doubting them. Without recognition, you start searching for explanations, trying to prove that you have good reason to suspect. But once you recognize it as a manipulation tactic, you don't waste your energy answering. You understand that the question isn't genuine. It's a diversion. That realization allows you to step outside the trap instead of playing their game. Recognition changes the emotional balance. Before, their questions stirred up guilt, fear, or self-doubt inside you. You felt cornered, pressured, or even ashamed. But when you recognize a manipulation question, you stop internalizing those emotions. Instead, you detach. You see their words as tools they are using, not as reflections of your worth or loyalty. That shift in perception takes away the emotional leverage they rely on. They can no longer guilt trip you into silence or make you afraid of losing their approval because you understand exactly what they're doing. The awareness itself becomes a shield against their tactics. Another reason recognition ends their power is because liars thrive on confusion. They use questions to cloud the issue and blur the truth. When you are caught in confusion, you hesitate, you second guess yourself, and in that hesitation, they insert control. Recognizing manipulation clears the fog. You begin to see patterns, the same phrases, the same shifts, the same attempts to redirect. With every pattern you notice, their methods become predictable. And once something is predictable, it loses its ability to surprise you. Without surprise, manipulation loses its grip. The act of recognizing manipulation also restores control of the conversation. Liars expect you to follow their lead, to let their questions guide the flow of discussion. But when you spot a manipulative question, you regain control by refusing to follow. You don't have to challenge them directly. You don't have to explain yourself. You simply don't step into the trap. That quiet refusal breaks their rhythm. It forces them to adjust, to scramble, to realize their usual tactics are no longer working. In that moment, the balance of power shifts from them to you. Recognition doesn't require confrontation. Many people fear calling out liars because they worry about escalation or conflict. The truth is, you don't need to accuse or argue. Simply seeing the tactic for what it is already removes its power. Even if you say nothing, even if you just stay calm and silent, the liar senses the difference. Their questions no longer get the reaction they expect. They can feel that the strings they usually pull are no longer attached. That alone weakens their influence. Recognizing manipulation also strengthens your confidence. Every time you see through a tactic, you reinforce your trust in your own instincts. Instead of feeling guilty or insecure, you feel certain. You realize that you are not overreacting, that your suspicions were not baseless, that your perception is accurate. That inner confidence makes you harder to manipulate in the future. The liar may try again, but each time you recognize their questions, the easier it becomes to resist. Over time, their tricks lose effectiveness because you are no longer the same person they could once control. The real impact of recognition is that it shifts the burden back where it belongs. Liars work so hard to place the burden on you. Your loyalty, your emotions, your guilt. Their questions are designed to trap you into carrying the weight of proving yourself. When you recognize the tactic, you drop that weight. You no longer carry responsibility for their actions or their words. You let the silence of their unanswered questions sit where it belongs, with them. That silence can be uncomfortable for them, but it is also revealing. It exposes the emptiness of their manipulation. In the end, recognition doesn't just protect you from being deceived in the moment. It changes the way you approach every interaction. You begin to listen more carefully, not just to what is said, but to why it is said. You stop reacting impulsively to questions that are meant to provoke, and instead you analyze the intent behind them. This sharpened awareness makes you far less likely to be manipulated again. Liars may continue to use their usual tactics, but once you see them clearly, they can no longer work the way they once did. Recognition takes the hidden weapon out of their hands and places control back into yours.